Hi crafty peeps, it's Kat. Today I'm turning trash into treasure. If you have some leftover acetate packaging lying around, this card will be the perfect way to use it. Today I'll show you two cards I made for both my mom and my bonus mom, aka my mother-in-law. And both designs are bold, bright, and super cheerful. In other words, just perfect for Mother's Day. I'll only be showing the entire process for one of the cards because all steps are the same, but you'll see both of them side by side at the very end. I know a lot of people mostly use acetate for shakers, but I thought why not make something different, something truly special? After all, don't our moms deserve the very best for putting up with us? And I have to say, while acetate can be hard to work with sometimes, these cards didn't give me much trouble at all. I'm starting out here by doing some die cutting. I'm using Waffle Flower Butterfly Blossom Collection today. It's been on my wish list for a while and I finally caved. It has a cover plate die, separate dies for the butterflies and the flowers, and a set of stencil to help you color all of it in. This cover plate die, the Waffle Flower calls it a texture die, I believe, cuts this gorgeous panel with 6 butterflies and a bunch of flowers. So I went ahead and cut 2 of those, and for one of them I will flip it around and we'll go over the back side of it to smooth out the edges. I promise this will make sense later on in the video, so just bear with me. The reason I'm doing this is because when you run the dice through your machine, if your cutting plates are well used and loved and full of scratches, the backside can look pretty rough, and the edges are usually, what's the best way to describe it, curled in, kind of? Well, the backside of my panel will be visible when you open the card, so I want to make sure that it looks neat. So the one on the left is exactly how it came out of the machine, and the one on the right is the one where I used the bone folder. Can you see the difference? It just really helps to smooth things out. Next, we're going to color our panel and the rest of our die cuts using stencils. There are 5 layering stencils in the set, and they make the whole process a breeze, honestly. However, if you don't want to spend money on stencils, you can color the panel with alcohol markers or watercolors or some other paint. It'll just take you a little bit longer. Okay, so I'm on my first layer here, and this one does the flowers. There are 2 types of flowers on a panel, and the stencils give you an option to color them different colors. You'll see when we get to the second layer. So if you wanted your flowers to be different here, the world is your oyster. I'm just doing both types of flowers in one color. I'm mostly using Pink Fresh inks today, but use what you have. This first color is Sparkling Rose or Rosé, not sure which one they meant in a name really, and it's a really light but a pretty bright pink. You know, my biggest issue with ink blending is that I usually tend to go ham with color. I'm just a very heavy-handed person, so I truly did my best here to go pretty light with the ink, but it still turned out very bright in the end, but I don't mind. Our first layer is done, and I'm going to move on to layer number 2. This is where you could make your second layer of flowers a different color if you wanted to. I'm using the same pink for the second layer as well. The stencils are pretty easy to line up, and they just make it super fast to color the entire panel, especially if you're using a larger brush for the first couple of layers. While I'm doing all the ink blending, let's talk about the colors that I picked for this card and why they work so well together. I actually have a color theory video in the works for you on how to easily pick out the colors for your cards, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. But I'll give you a little sneak peek here. The colors I'm going with are pink, blue-green, aka teal, and yellow-green. If you look on the color wheel, you will find that this is a split complementary color combo. But hold on a second, this one has red, not pink. Well, pink is red with white added in, so it really is a shade of red, or a tint of red, to be more precise. To find your split complementary combo, pick your base color first, then go straight across from it on the color wheel to find its complement. In our case, the complement of red or pink would be green. Then instead of taking green, you're going to take the colors on either side of it. So your color choice kind of splits to the sides from the complementary color. In our example, it's going to be your teal or blue-green and your chartreusey kind of color or yellow-leaning green. But do you know why this type of color combo works? Well, there are really only 2 ways in which you can combine your colors. And by that I mean you either create contrast or you create harmony. The colors that are close to each other on the color wheel will create harmony because they often share a common base color. The colors that oppose each other on the wheel will create lots and lots of contrast. If you take red and you take green, for example, these are complementary colors that will create tons of contrast. And it's a very popular Christmas combo for a reason. It's a very, very punchy combo and it's pretty stimulating to your eyes. When you choose 2 split complementary colors instead, you're lowering your level of contrast. Don't get me wrong, it's still plenty of contrast, it's just not as much tension as your red plus green. And what I've also done here to further reduce tension is instead of red, I went with pink, which is essentially a diluted version of red. So what I've done is took a super punchy color combo, your red and green, which I gotta say it's probably my least favorite color combination out of all of them, but that's besides the point. And then I lowered the level of contrast by choosing split complements instead, and by lowering the intensity of my red. And what I end up with is a combination that offers plenty of vibrancy and contrast, but it's not as obnoxious and in your face. I think it's a pretty nicely balanced palette. What do you guys think? Here I am finishing up my layer number 4 of the stencils, I believe, and it's all starting to come together nicely. I'm now on the final layer number 5, and this one does the leaves and the flower centers. Now, this is a tiny bit tricky because some of the openings are really close to each other, so it would be pretty easy to get the wrong ink where you don't want it if you're not careful. I got a very small brush, and this is actually an eyeshadow brush I got off Amazon. This type is called pencil brush. These were super cheap and they work wonderfully for tiny areas like this. You know, your brushes don't always have to be expensive. So I'm going over the flower centers with the darker version of that first pink that I used. This is bubblegum color. And if you're wondering what is that strip I'm using to mask things, it's just a strip of mylar material I got off Amazon for pretty cheap too. I don't know if you've ever seen, but some of the big card creators like to use those things called corner guides. If you just Google corner guide stenciling, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Those guides are made of the same material as the stencils, but they cost like 12 or 15 bucks or something. I saw that and I was like, ain't no way I'm paying 12 bucks for that. So instead, I got a set of 10 sheets of 12 by 12 mylar material of Amazon. And I got my own corner guides and masking strips. The only tool I needed for that was my trimmer. And it cost me something like 8 bucks altogether. If you want a video on how to make your own guides or how to make your own stencils, please let me know in the comments. It's a video idea I've been playing with for a while. Okay, I've moved on to my leaves now, and I switched to Simon Says Stamp inks. This is in shade Dublin. It's the medium shade out of the ink trio. So I'll go over my leaves to give them a good base of green color. I try to pick the most yellow leaning green that I have in my collection, and this is what I got. You know, if you don't have the right shade, quote unquote, you could probably mix your own green here if you wanted to, if you have yellow and blue. I would combine a little bit of light blue and a mid to light yellow in a larger quantity. Though, fair warning, try it on a scrap of paper first to see if that works. Here I switched to the darkest shade of green from the trio. This is Lucky and I'm using a smaller brush and I'm going in at the base of the leaves to create some shading. And we are done with our panel. Let's peel and reveal here. Ta-da! It's gorgeous. Honestly, if you were feeling super lazy that day, you could just leave it as is and call it a day. This is already super stunning. However, I'm going the extra mile here, so I'll color in my extra die cuts with the same colors as my panel. I'm not using a stencil for my base layer since there's really no need. These die cuts are the ones that I cut out with the additional die. It just cuts the butterflies and the flowers and the flower centers. So I'll repeat the coloring process for the butterflies with the lighter teal as base, and then we'll come in with the darker teal for the details. I thought I was going to use the dark teal bodies for the butterflies, but you'll see later on I ended up changing my mind. Then for the butterfly details, I will use the stencil, and it lines up perfectly with these extra die cuts, so it's pretty fast and easy. For the separate flowers, you actually don't need the stencil at all since the flower centers get cut as a separate piece. So I'll give them a layer of my lighter pink color as a base first. Then I'll take that same light pink, but a smaller brush, and I will go just right around the edges of the flowers to create some color variation. I'm basically just going heavier with the same color of ink here. This will be subtle once the ink dries down, but I think it does make a difference in the end. And since it's a card for Mama, I'm putting in the extra effort here. And for the flower centers, I use the darker bubblegum shade of pink. Then I'm going to quickly glue my flower parts and my butterfly parts together. Now for the main event, we're gonna turn some trash into treasure. I have here a piece of acetate that I cut to 4 1/4 by 6 inches, and I'm scoring it at 1/2 inch on a longer side. I'm basically giving this acetate a second life as it was destined for the trash can. I recently bought a large set of cheap makeup brushes, and the box had a cutout window with acetate in it, and I kind of got lucky that it was large enough for me to cut it to size that I needed for this card. Okay, back to the card. I've scored the acetate on the longer side at 1/2 inch and reinforced that fold by burnishing it down and bending it a few times. This will be my card front. Then I flipped it to the back side and put some double-sided tape on that flap and some liquid glue to give me extra wiggle room. I then took a single panel of 4¼ by 5½ inch cardstock, lined it up with the acetate, and glued them together. And to make sure everything sticks properly, I also went over the glued portion with the bone folder. And if you have any glue oozing out, just make sure to clean it up with a slightly damp paper towel. Okay, so here I have an almost complete top folding card base. The card front is clear and the back is your regular cardstock. I'll burnish it down one more time just for good luck. Now, to hide the adhesive on the acetate, I will glue on another panel on top of my existing one and on top of that acetate flap. So I'm essentially sandwiching my acetate between two cardstock panels. So I'm hiding the adhesive, but at the same time, I'm making the card base sturdier too. This time, I'm just using liquid glue here in case I need to be able to slide things around. So I just lined up those two panels and I'll put something heavy on top to make sure it all adheres nicely. Liquid glue dries very slowly on acetate, so make sure you give it enough time to stick. But once it dries, it's not going anywhere, so I'll then glue my pretty and colorful panel to the very front of my card. So to be clear, I'm putting the glue on the back of the stenciled piece and gluing it to the very, very front of the acetate. And I'll wiggle it into place until I'm happy with the position. It's much easier to do if you're looking straight at your card, so sorry if I'm a little out of frame here. And once I'm done, I'll put my acrylic block and my heavy case of wax seals on top to make sure that the acetate makes proper contact with the front panel. I really have to stress here that you do need to give it a bit of time to dry, so just try your best to be patient. While that's drying, I will work on my sentiment. I cut it once from silver cardstock and 5 more times from plain white, and I will stack them for extra dimension. I also have a shadow that I cut from vellum, and I'm gonna use a trick here that will make it look like the vellum is floating off of the background. I will first stack 2 blanks behind my silver piece, so it will be 3 layers thick. Then I will stack my remaining 3 backings and glue them together too. So this piece will also be 3 layers thick. So now I have 2 thick sentiment parts, one with silver on top and one that's just plain white. So first I'll grab the sentiment piece that has the silver and we'll glue it to the vellum shadow like you typically would. I'm using tiny dots of glue here because I don't want any to ooze out because vellum will show everything. This vellum, by the way, is recycled too. I just cut up a wedding invitation jacket from a long time ago. Now for the trick part. I will flip my piece with the shadow around and I'll put glue on the front, sorry my head gets in the way, on the front of my white sentiment piece. And then I will glue it from the back, lining it up with the letters the best I can. So I'm sandwiching my vellum between my sentiment layers. Here's a close-up for you. I have 3 cardstock layers on top and 3 on the bottom. I hope you can kind of make it out. Now that the glue is dry, look at what we got. This card stands nicely on display, and guys, I wish I could show you proper what it looks like when you look at it straight on, but it's kind of hard to do with the overhead camera. But because I used acetate for the front piece, it actually looks like the front panel is floating in the air when you look at it straight on. There's only one slight problem here. You can totally see all the adhesive on the back when you open the card. However, if you remember from the beginning of the video, I actually cut 2 panels and I burnished one down with the bone folder to smooth the back of it out. So to remedy the situation, I will glue that second piece on the inside of my acetate to hide that glue. This time you'd need to put the glue on the front of your panel instead of the back. I'm actually putting it right on the acetate here because it's easier and the nozzle of the glue bottle doesn't catch on the cutout parts of the panel. And then I'll give it some time to dry under my heavy block and wax seal case. To get some extra dimension, I'm gonna pop up my flowers and my butterflies. And if you've noticed, the butterfly bodies are now silver. I changed them so that it ties better with the sentiment. I feel like it looks more cohesive that way. So for the flowers, I'm using the thin foam squares, just one in the center of each flower. And I'm gonna put them where there is a corresponding flower on the panel. I thought at first I needed to have them perfectly line up, but I actually think they look better if you don't line them up perfectly. So I'm gonna offset them. For the butterflies, I'm using thick foam squares and I've cut mine in half. And I'll attach them only to the very middle where the body is because I want to be able to fold up the wings for extra oomph. I will line up my butterflies properly, though it's actually not hard to do at all. You just line up the corners of the wings on one side and the rest kind of falls into place on its own. And I'll press them down and will also fold up those wings for extra dimension. The last thing left is to attach my sentiment. I won't use any foam squares here since I've already stacked it like 6 layers thick, so it has plenty of lift. I'm gonna glue it straight to the panel in the lower left. I feel like it's such a nice spot for the sentiment, it just makes it nest in there nicely. I'll just do my best to make sure it's all nice and even. Once it's all dry, time for a reveal. Y'all, I am so happy with how this card turned out. The colors, the dimension, the see-through floating front of it. Ugh, I just think it's gorgeous. And if you look at the sentiment, it creates a bit of a shadow between the vellum and the background, so it kind of looks like it's floating too. You can definitely get an even better lift if you stack more sentiment layers. And now, as promised, the second card I made for my mother-in-law. It was all the same steps, just a different color palette. And can you actually tell what kind of color combination it is? Let me know in the comments. And also, don't forget to tell me which one is your favorite. Here are both of them side by side. Ugh, so pretty. All right, I'll catch you guys in the next video.